Tim Allen and Jonathan Taylor Thomas once stood side by side as one of television's most beloved father and son duos, but beneath the bright lights and roaring studio audience, something far more complicated was unfolding. Tim Allen, known for his warmth, humor, and long-running devotion to both home improvement and the people who built it with him, carried a deep and lasting wound from one co-star. And that co-star was Jonathan Taylor Thomas. Their bond began as something genuine, rooted in admiration and mentorship. Yet over the years it fractured into disappointment, silence, and an unspoken hurt that never fully healed. As audiences adored their on-screen relationship, Allen found himself navigating feelings of betrayal sparked by choices he neither expected nor understood. What began as a tight-knit creative partnership slowly shifted into distance, tension, and eventually a rift that followed both men long after the cameras stopped rolling. The truth behind why Tim Allen truly hated no co-star more than Jonathan Taylor Thomas is far more human and far more painful than the public ever imagined. From the moment Home Improvement premiered in the year 1991, Tim Allen became the centerpiece of a series that transformed him from stand-up comic to household name. Jonathan Taylor Thomas joined the cast as Randy Taylor, the clever, charming middle son, whose quick wit made him an instant favorite among fans. Their earliest years together were marked by a genuine connection. Tim called him a little adult in interviews from the early 1990s, referring to his unusual professionalism and maturity at such a young age. What began as admiration gradually evolved into a mentor-like relationship. Tim encouraged his talent, applauded his focus, and often guided him through the pressures of performing at such a young age. The show soared to success. By the mid-1990s, it stood among ABC's most-watched sitcoms. Tim's career expanded into film with titles like The Santa Claus in 1994 and Toy Story in 1995, where he voiced the now iconic character Buzz Lightyear. Meanwhile, Jonathan Taylor Thomas became one of the era's biggest teen stars. He voiced young Simba in Disney's The Lion King in 1994 and headlined major film projects, including Tom and Huck and Man of the House. But with new fame for both men came new responsibilities, pressures, and demands on their time. For Tim Allen, who had worked years on the comedy club circuit and experienced the grind of late nights and rejection, loyalty meant everything. He valued consistency. He valued commitment. He valued showing up no matter how tired, stressed, or stretched thin he felt. Home Improvement was not just a job to him. It was the foundation of his stardom, and the project he believed had given every cast member their platform. In his mind, the show came first. As Jonathan Taylor Thomas's fame reached full force, the production schedule became increasingly difficult, balancing schoolwork, film shoots, voice acting, press obligations, and sitcom rehearsals left him exhausted. Crew members later shared that he often arrived tired after juggling multiple commitments. This, however, was not unusual for a child actor at his level. What made this dynamic fragile was how strongly Tim Allen believed in prioritizing the sitcom that made them a household name. Tension began to surface. Cast and crew recalled the shift. Tim began to worry that Jonathan's outside projects affected rehearsal time. Production staff noted that Tim's patience thinned when scenes slowed down or had to be adjusted. Many described him as passionate and intense, someone who always pushed for the best joke delivery and timing. His expectations for a young actor in such a demanding role were naturally high, and as Jonathan's schedule tightened, small frustrations grew into quiet resentment. Although the public continued to see a united family on screen, subtle cracks began forming behind the scenes. Interviews during the mid to late 90s revealed Tim's tone shifting slightly. He continued to praise Jonathan's talent, but he also began emphasizing concerns about burnout and the importance of remembering where one's career began. These comments hinted at deeper feelings brewing beneath the surface. The early harmony between Tim Allen and Jonathan Taylor Thomas was real. But fame, ambition, and conflicting priorities slowly built the foundation for the emotional break to come. By the seventh season of Home Improvement, the relationship between Tim Allen and Jonathan Taylor Thomas had shifted dramatically. Jonathan was no longer the young boy Tim had mentored. He was a rising star who had captured the hearts of millions and who faced intense pressure from studios, agents, and personal aspirations. When Jonathan decided that he wanted to step back from the series during its eighth and final season to focus on his education, this decision created the deepest wound between him and Tim. Jonathan announced he would not return as a series regular. He expressed the desire to pursue academic goals and attend college. For many, this was a reasonable and admirable decision. After years of non-stop work starting from childhood, he wanted a sense of normality. His absence was written into the show with a storyline sending Randy Taylor to Costa Rica for an environmental study program. But Tim Allen did not see the departure as a neutral or purely personal choice. For him, the show had been the vehicle that elevated every cast member. To step away during its crucial final season felt like an abandonment. During promotional interviews for the last season, Tim made comments about loyalty and commitment that, although not naming Jonathan directly, were unmistakably directed at him. Another moment stung Tim deeply. In December of the year 1998, while the Home Improvement cast was filming its final episodes, Jonathan Taylor Thomas appeared in the feature film I Will Be Home for Christmas. To Tim, this seemed to contradict the stated reason for his departure. This perception widened the emotional distance. What Tim interpreted as dishonesty became the core of the resentment he carried. When the final episode of Home Improvement was filmed in 1999, nearly the entire cast returned to give the show a proper farewell. Jonathan did not. His absence was described by many crew members as the moment they realized the relationship between him and Tim had reached a breaking point. Tim later admitted publicly that it felt odd and disappointing. The man who had built an entire show around the theme of family could not comprehend why the young actor who had once been like a son chose not to come back for a final goodbye. The fracture between them became one of the most discussed tensions in 90s television history. Fans noticed the absence. Journalists asked about it repeatedly. And each time, Tim's responses grew shorter, cooler, and more restrained. He never used cruel or extreme public language, but the underlying disappointment was clear. He spoke often about loyalty. He mentioned the importance of honoring one's commitments. These statements revealed a deeper personal wound. What he experienced was not simply a difference in career choices. It was the feeling of betrayal by someone he had cared for, supported, and believed in. For Jonathan, the decision was likely rooted in exhaustion, life changes, and a genuine desire to find himself outside of the spotlight. For Tim, it felt personal, even if he never said so directly. The breaking of trust, rooted in conflicting expectations about loyalty and responsibility, became the emotional core of Tim Allen's long-standing resentment. After the show ended in 1999, the relationship between Tim Allen and Jonathan Taylor Thomas entered a prolonged and almost haunting era of silence. Unlike typical Hollywood feuds, fueled by tabloids, public statements, or fiery social media exchanges, this one quietly unfolded in the shadows. Their drift apart was marked not by visible conflict or scandal, but by the absence of communication and the lingering weight of unresolved emotion. The cameras stopped rolling, but the tension lingered, subtle yet palpable, leaving a void where a father-son-like bond had once flourished. Tim Allen, unwavering in his commitment to the entertainment world, continued forward with a steadiness that defined his career. He lent his voice once more to Buzz Lightyear in the Toy Story franchise, starred in multiple sequels of the Santa Claus films, and returned triumphantly to network television with the launch of Last Man Standing in the year 2011. His life remained rooted in the public sphere, grounded in the belief that longevity and consistency were the pillars of a meaningful career. Every project he took on reinforced the image of the seasoned performer who had weathered the unpredictable tides of Hollywood and emerged resilient, steadfast, and determined to honor the work he loved. Jonathan Taylor Thomas, however, chose a path almost diametrically opposed to the one Tim pursued. Immediately after leaving Home Improvement, he stepped back from the limelight entirely, creating a quiet chasm between himself and the world that had once celebrated him. He enrolled at Harvard University, later transferring to Columbia University, where he studied philosophy and history, pursuits that reflected a deep yearning for intellectual growth and personal discovery rather than public acclaim. Fans who had once admired him on magazine covers and television screens suddenly found him elusive. Interviews were rare, red carpets were avoided, and reunion events including the 2009 TV Land Awards attended by much of the Home Improvement cast were declined. This absence, this deliberate retreat, reinforced Tim's feelings of exclusion, leaving him grappling with the reality that someone he had once mentored and cared for so deeply was now a world away, both physically and emotionally. When interviewers inquired about Jonathan, Tim's responses were characteristically measured yet pointed. He often replied that they did not keep in touch, swiftly redirecting the conversation. Over time, this pattern became a quiet refrain, a gentle yet unmistakable indication of the lingering tension. While Tim maintained warm, ongoing relationships with other former cast members such as Richard Karn and Zachary Ty Bryan, Jonathan became the notable exception. The absence of contact carried an almost symbolic weight, echoing the emotional distance that had begun to form during the show's later seasons, and silently communicating a fracture that words could never fully capture. Behind closed doors, according to multiple sources who worked with both actors, Tim was more candid about the hurt he felt. He reportedly described the situation as confusing and deeply disappointing, stemming from a place of genuine belief in Jonathan's talent and potential. Insiders suggested that Tim struggled to reconcile Jonathan's complete withdrawal from Hollywood with the bond they had once shared. Without dialogue, frustration solidified into resentment, and that resentment hardened into an emotional wall that neither seemed able or willing to dismantle. The quiet nature of their estrangement only intensified the ache, making it both invisible to the public and profoundly present in Tim's private reflections. The divergence of their careers only widened this divide. Tim's life remained public, active, and grounded in the entertainment world, while Jonathan pursued academic endeavors and personal privacy. Their priorities, values, and identities had drifted so far apart that they seemed to exist in entirely separate universes. Yet, remarkably, there was never a public outburst or a dramatic confrontation. Tim's disappointment was tempered, expressed with careful, measured language, but those who observed the arc of their relationship understood that the silence said far more than words ever could. The absence of warmth, the absence of connection, the absence of closure. These gaps formed the quiet emotional heart of a wound that never fully healed, a reminder that sometimes in Hollywood and in life, the deepest hurts are carried in silence rather than spectacle. In a world where many conflicts dissolve with nostalgia or time, the distance between Tim Allen and Jonathan Taylor Thomas remained a stark, enduring reminder. Some relationships, once broken, leave a quiet ache that endures, unspoken but unmistakable. The hurt was never shouted. It was simply carried, etched into the years, and reflected in the careful way. Tim remembered a young actor who had once been like family, yet had quietly become a stranger. By the time the year 2013 arrived, the entertainment world was quietly surprised when Jonathan Taylor Thomas appeared on Tim Allen's sitcom Last Man Standing. After more than a decade of near silence, this unexpected reunion carried with it the weight of years spent apart, though no public acknowledgement of past tension was ever made. Fans, long accustomed to hearing little from Thomas, speculated whether this guest appearance might signal a thawing in their complicated relationship. What unfolded on screen, however, was carefully professional, revealing little about the undercurrents that had shaped their years of estrangement. Thomas appeared as a restaurant owner employing Allen's character's daughter, a role that allowed the two actors to share screen time without revisiting the father-son dynamic that had defined Home Improvement. Behind the scenes, sources close to production, noted that their interactions were polite and courteous, yet marked by a subtle distance. One crew member observed that while they were cordial, there was no sense of the warmth or camaraderie that had once characterized their on-set relationship. Another described their exchanges as professional, measured and careful, suggesting that although the bitterness of the past had softened, genuine reconciliation remained tentative. Every gesture and conversation appeared guided by respect for the work rather than a rekindling of personal closeness. During interviews promoting the episode, Tim Allen spoke of Jonathan with careful neutrality, emphasizing professionalism over personal sentiment. He praised Thomas's talent and dedication while avoiding discussion of the long years of silence. Tim acknowledged that Jonathan was a smart actor who had found other interests in college, choosing words that respected his former co-star without revisiting the emotional fissures between them. These measured statements reflected the lingering distance, an unspoken acknowledgement of how far their relationship had changed since the days of home improvement. Jonathan Taylor Thomas himself maintained the same restraint. His participation in Last Man Standing was discreet, focused on fulfilling his role rather than making any statements about their shared history. Observers noted that Thomas remained calm and professional, delivering his performance with skill, yet without the familiar informality or warmth of previous interactions. Unlike the mentor-protégé bond that had once flourished on set, this reunion presented a controlled, professional dynamic that emphasized courtesy over personal connection. The past was neither erased nor revisited openly. It existed quietly in the spaces between lines and scenes, a subtle tension noticeable only to those paying attention. This measured reunion extended over subsequent episodes and seasons, including Thomas directing one episode in the year 2016. While this involvement suggested a degree of professional reconciliation, it did not erase the years of emotional distance. Those working on the show noted that the two men could collaborate effectively, yet there remained an invisible layer of history hovering above every interaction. Their professionalism allowed for cooperation and on-screen harmony, but the earlier warmth and familial connection never fully returned. Every scene carried an unspoken acknowledgement of what had been lost, a subtle reminder of the complex layers of their relationship. Despite the distance, neither man expressed public hostility. Tim continued to maintain relationships with other former cast members with warmth and consistency, including Richard Karn and Zachary Ty Bryan. The contrast with his interactions with Thomas made the silence all the more striking. The absence of overt conflict did not signify resolution, rather it underscored a different kind of tension, one carried in memory and experience, rather than words. The professionalism of the reunion masked years of unresolved emotion, allowing both to navigate shared work without reliving the personal disappointments that had shaped their estrangement. In essence, the Last Man Standing era offered a glimpse of what might have been a reconciliation, but it was carefully contained within professional boundaries. The interactions were courteous, efficient, and competent, yet the emotional intimacy of earlier years remained elusive. The reunion demonstrated that while time can ease the sharpness of old hurts, it does not always restore the bonds once taken for granted. For Tim Allen and Jonathan Taylor Thomas, the quiet civility of this period was both progress and reminder. Some relationships endure, but not always in the way those involved once imagined. After Home Improvement ended in 1999, the paths of Tim Allen and Jonathan Taylor Thomas moved in entirely different directions. Tim remained firmly rooted in the entertainment world, continuing to voice Buzz Lightyear in the Toy Story films, starring in sequels of The Santa Claus, and returning to network television with Last Man Standing in the year 2011. His career reflected a commitment to consistency and perseverance, a belief that longevity in Hollywood required dedication and visible effort. For Tim, the industry was not just a job but a life built around work, collaboration, and public presence. Jonathan chose a contrasting path, stepping almost entirely out of the spotlight. After leaving the show, he enrolled at Harvard University before transferring to Columbia University, where he studied philosophy and history. Appearances in film or television became rare, and he avoided interviews, red carpet events, and reunion gatherings, including the 2009 TV Land Awards, where most of the Home Improvement cast was present. The young actor who had once captured the attention of millions retreated from the public eye, prioritizing personal growth and privacy over fame. His absence created a noticeable void, reinforcing the sense of distance for Tim, who had considered Jonathan almost family. The contrast between their lives highlighted the growing emotional divide. Tim's world remained public, structured, and grounded in shared experiences from their time on set. Jonathan's withdrawal reflected priorities far removed from Hollywood, emphasizing education, intellectual fulfillment, and personal privacy. Tim's occasional comments about Jonathan were brief, measured, and neutral, focusing on professionalism rather than the personal bond they once shared. The absence of warmth and connection conveyed more than words ever could, signaling a rift rooted in years of unmet expectations and diverging ambitions. Differences in values and life choices deepened the separation. Tim, who had worked for years to achieve success, valued loyalty, commitment, and steady progress. Jonathan prioritized exploration, learning, and a life less defined by public visibility. Where one built on continuity, the other pursued change. This fundamental divergence meant that even when paths crossed professionally, including Jonathan's guest appearance on Last Man Standing in 2013 and directing an episode in 2016, the connection lacked the intimacy and mentorship of earlier years. Their interactions remained polite and professional, but the bond that had once defined them could not be fully restored. Even in silence, the story of Tim and Jonathan carries emotional weight. Their relationship, once marked by affection and guidance, became defined by absence, distance, and unspoken disappointment. Tim's continued success and Jonathan's retreat into private life illustrate how ambition, values, and personal priorities can reshape relationships irreversibly. The divergence of their careers and choices left a quiet, lingering ache, a reminder that some connections, once altered, remain forever changed. In Hollywood, time and distance may heal public feuds, but in this case the quiet estrangement left a lasting impression, carried in the memories of those who witnessed the relationship firsthand. The story of Tim Allen and Jonathan Taylor Thomas is not one of explosive conflict or public feuds, but of quiet distance and unspoken disappointment. What began as a father-son-like bond on the set of Home Improvement transformed over years into an emotional gap neither could bridge. Tim continued to build a career defined by consistency, dedication, and public presence, while Jonathan chose a path of privacy, education, and personal growth, stepping almost entirely away from the world that had once celebrated him. Their diverging priorities and values created a lasting divide, one that was never aired in headlines or loud interviews, but carried in the subtle weight of absence. Even when paths crossed professionally years later, the warmth of their early relationship could not be fully restored. It is a story that reveals how differences in ambition, perspective, and life choices can quietly reshape relationships, leaving emotional marks that remain long after the cameras stop rolling. For Tim Allen, Jonathan Taylor Thomas remains the co-star he never forgot, a reminder of bonds that once altered carry echoes that time cannot fully erase. For more emotional stories, check out this video.